All right, let's go ahead and get this started. So, as the title says, when hashtag not all turns to arguing the exception. So, I've said this before on my channel, and I'll say it again. I don't argue the exception on my discussions. The reason why is because the exception is the exception. Hey, Hapless, how's it going? But the thing is I've noticed that there are a lot of people that are trying that ended up failing with the hashtag not all, because the thing is it's actually hashtag the vast majority. I've noticed that people, when they fail with the hashtag not all, they then go to arguing the exception. Perfect example is I was watching another one of the smaller MGTOW channels. I'll go ahead and put the link to the video down below. But he he had a snippet from this guy that's on radio broadcast, and this woman called in. This guy, he he's very much so MGTOW, but he's also kind of PUA. So he's that unholy fusion between the two. But the thing is, this woman called in, and this guy was saying, you know, it's cheaper to buy to hire a housekeeper than to have a wife. And the guy's absolutely right. I mean, in all honesty, and at least with a housekeeper, you're pretty much guaranteed that the job's going to get done. Hey, NYC, how's it going? Uh, but this woman ended up calling in, and when she did, it was the funniest thing ever, because she ended up getting absolutely trounced by this guy, and she knew that she was getting trounced. She knew that there was no that there was no way out of it. And Voltaire NYC is the channel. Um, but the thing, I think it might be MGTOW 101's alt channel. It's the same icon. But when this woman called in, she was saying that she had a problem with him saying to pump and dump women, all that sort of thing. And she, you know, and she said that was objectifying women, blah, 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 yada, 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 you know, the typical fucking thing. But then she tried to argue that marriage provides stability for a man. Well, this guy is a no bullshit guy. Absolutely fucking love it. And he just absolutely demolished her on that. He's all like, actually, with as easy as it is to get a divorce, a marriage provides absolutely no stability for the man. None whatsoever. So I ask you again, what does the man get out of marriage? Nothing. And so she was sitting there and trying to say, oh, well, you know, he gets a woman that, you know, will do this, this. He's all like, there might be women out there. In fact, there are. It's called foreign women. But the thing is in the US, that is not the case. The vast majority of women in the US do not act that way in a relationship. Some foreign women, yes, depending on the culture that they're coming from, but not women in the US. Me, I would extend that to women in the Western world at this point. And then she sat there and said, well, I went through a divorce and I didn't take half of his shit. And he's all like, yes, but you could have. That's the problem, is you could have. The option is there. The option for you to fuck the guy over is there. So that's the kicker. You know, it's all like, the option is there for the woman to fuck over the guy. Does she have to take the option? No. Is every last woman going to take the option to fuck the guy? No. because there are some women out there with at least some level of scruples, and some women are actually learning that if they get known as the woman that destroys a guy after the first time, once word gets out, especially in a small community like where I live, a somewhat tight-knit community, oh hell no, she's not finding anyone unless someone moves in and she gets her claws into him before someone tells him. But then he's going to find out and he's going to dump her sorry ass. But people sit there and they argue the exception constantly. Don't argue the exception. The exception is the exception to the rule. It's just like with identity politics, you know? People sit there and argue the exception all the fucking time. They're all like, well, look at this person, look at this person, look at this person. It's all like, yeah, but look at the other millions of people that aren't that person. And they'll argue the exception both in positive and negative, depending on how on what race they're fucking talking about, or what gender they're talking about, what sexual orientation they're talking about, blah 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 blah, all the way down the fucking goddamn progressive stack line. But yeah, when uh when it comes down to it, the thing is people will argue the exception because they know that the majority is not what they want to argue. That's that's basically what this boils down to. Like people will sit there and say, "Oh, well, you know, we've got, you know, this hate group, and it has a bunch of, you know, it has this large amount, quote unquote, of white people in there. You know, when it has 1 or 200, or maybe 600 or 700, and then they sit there and they cast that wide ass net over billions of people, saying all of them are like that." But then you get shit where it's a group that they want to protect, like let's say, oh, I don't know, Islam, you know, and then they'll sit there and they'll say, well, not all Muslims will fucking go out and blow themselves up. It's all like, yeah, but a very 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 terrifying amount of them believe that it's okay. But at that point they're doing the hashtag not all, but they refuse to do the hashtag not all for white people. Then you've got feminists. They'll sit there and say hashtag not all women will kill their own children, although a very high percentage of them do. A disturbingly high percentage of them do. But then they'll sit there and say all men are rapists, even though a staggeringly small percentage of men will ever commit rape in their lifetime, at least in the Western world. So then whenever someone sits there and goes, hey, here's this culture where the vast majority of guys will commit rape during their lifetime, but they're all like, yeah, but that's just their culture. You can't fucking judge them on that. You can't judge their culture. You're not a part of it, so you can't judge it. Fuck you. I hate it when people argue the exception. How about this? Stick to the fucking facts, for Christ's sake. I'm actually going to go ahead and do a live stream either later on today or sometime tomorrow. It might end up having to get held off until Monday if I can't do it in the latter part of the day today, on the problems with identity politics. And I'm going to go ahead and break it all down. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a little while, and so I'm going to go ahead and do it. But the thing is when people argue the exception, they're ignoring the majority. And typically when people argue the exception, it's based off of bias. If you're trying to have an actual discussion, you have to be able to at least attempt to take your bias and set it to the side, especially if you're trying to solve what you perceive is a problem. Hey, Purge, how's it going? What's up, Nick? How's it going, Alan? What's up, Red Dragon? But yeah, it's it's one of those situations. It pisses me off because of the fact that we remember the arguments that have been used before. And when the people who were sitting there previously saying, oh, those arguments are invalid, start to use those same arguments when their argument fits less in the situation that they're using the arguments in, that's when people get pissed off. That's when people get frustrated. That's when people go ahead and go all out on these people. That's the kicker. But when people do that, you have to call them out on it. Like yesterday, I ended up shooting a video. I'm going to go ahead and reshoot it because I noticed that at several points, some loud vehicles went by that I hadn't really noticed. So I hadn't cut it out. And it just happened at the worst possible times in the video. So I'm going to have to reshoot the video. But that video is still going to be coming out. I just have to reshoot it. But no, you have to call them out on it. And the reason why is because people have to learn that if you are not going to accept an argument from one person or one group of people, then you cannot expect anyone to accept that same exact argument coming from you. You can't. You have to show at least some level of consistency. So when someone sits there and says something stupid along the lines of, "Oh, this race is full of racists," it's like, really? And you're wondering, even if it is true, like let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say it is true. You might have just answered the question as to why they are full of racists. Because if people are being consistently racist against you, you're going to tend to get racist against the people that are being racist against you. You're going to tend to view that group of people in a very negative light. When women are sexist against men and then sit there and say, oh, women can't be sexist against men because we insert weak ass excuse here. Yeah, at that point, you're birthing misogynists. At that point, you will get guys that legitimately think that women are not worth the spit to spit on. And I can't blame them. Same thing with these guys who sit there and just inherently have that, just sit there and it's just part of who they are, will sit there and treat women like that. I can't blame women if all the guys that they've met have been like that, or the vast majority of the guys that they met have been like that, them kind of starting to hate men. I can't blame them, to be fair. But what I can't stand is when people will sit there, have this absolutely fantastic set of advantages over people, and then claim that they're somehow being oppressed, or they're somehow being held back, or there's somehow the world is against them. Especially these motherfuckers that sit there, are born into a family where just their crib alone was worth 50,000 fucking dollars. Were literally fed with silver spoons during their childhood, and then never have to work a day in their fucking goddamn lives, and still be able to live a life much better than a hard working middle class or working poor family, with them having contributed absolutely fucking nothing to society other than their bitching, whining, pissing, and moaning. And then they have the audacity to sit there and say, oh, there's so much injustice in the world. Yeah, you're part of it. Do the world a favor, off yourself. But the fact of the matter is when you look at the situation, the vast majority of these people who are arguing the exception are doing so because they can't use the hashtag not all, or because they don't want to use it. Argument. You know, they don't want to use that. And then you've got these people that sit there, have all the opportunities in the world, squander them, and then bitch and complain that the world didn't capitulate to them. Are you fucking kidding me? Like with me, perfect example, okay? I'm one of those people, I had multiple opportunities. I made bad choices in my life. I don't hold the world responsible for it. Those were my decisions. That's called being a fucking adult, is accepting the consequences of your own decisions. But I'm seeing fewer and fewer and fewer people doing that. They'll sit there and say, well, this person made all the same choices as me, and this opportunity fell into their lap, but it didn't fall into my lap. Let's look at the difference between me. Oh, this person has a dick, I have a vagina. That must be the reason. Or this person's white and I'm black. That must be the only reason. No, what it is, it's called fucking goddamn luck at that point. You're arguing because the other person ended up getting a lucky break and you didn't. Not everyone's going to win the fucking lottery. All right? If you want to succeed in life, you have to go ahead and put in the effort. And even if you put in the effort, there's no guarantee that you'll succeed. I hear all these people saying, oh, if you just work hard enough, you'll be able to succeed. That is not necessarily true. Sometimes you'll have a run of bad luck. Sometimes every last thing that can possibly go wrong will go wrong. You have to be prepared for that in life. But we're not preparing our kids for that in life. That's our job as parents, as adults, is to get kids ready to be adults. And we're failing. We're failing horribly at that. And so now we have this situation. And unfortunately, it is a self-feeding situation, because now these kids who were not taught how to be an adult don't know how to be an adult, and are now raising kids of their own and not teaching them how to be adults. In fact, they're teaching them how to stay perpetually children. But the thing is at this point, whenever you hear someone arguing the exception, Smack them down with proof. Smack them down with evidence. Smack them down with fact. Bring reality to full bear on them. Because you may not change their mind, but you don't have to change their mind, because anyone else that's watching will see that and go, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get embarrassed later on. I don't want to be made to look the fool. That's how you fight this shit. That's the reason why I don't pass up opportunities for an argument, whether it be in real life or online. Unless a person, what they're saying is so far out of reality that other people are starting to jump in, at that point, I might not waste the energy, especially if I've got bigger fish to fry. And guys in the chat, just making a request of you, please try to keep other channel drama out of my chats. Please, honestly. I mean, if you want to go ahead and talk about that stuff, I have my Discord. Y'all can get together on my Discord and you can go ahead and go off on it there. But in my live streams, please don't do that in the chats, because it really takes away from the discussion. I want you guys to actually get involved in the discussion. I want you guys to feed into it. That's one of the reasons why my streams have been so short. Oh, it's all good, guys. It's all good. I got no problems with you guys talking about stuff, and that is stuff that needs to be talked about. But there's a time and a place. But honestly, since you guys are so keen to talk, what are your thoughts on this? Do you get as pissed off as I do whenever someone argues the exception? Is or is this just me? Is this just a pet peeve of mine and no one else in the world fucking has it? Like, honestly, that's the reason why I don't argue the exception, because the thing is I know how much it pisses me the fuck off. If I wanted to, I could easily argue the exception. I'm good at that. I've done it before. But I don't like to do it because I piss myself off. And it really fucking sucks. But the thing is the only time I can see someone arguing the exception would be in a court of law. And that's if, there's this situation where a person's being accused of something based off of what they are, and there's all this evidence to the contrary. At that point, okay, that person is the exception, so you need to make note of it. But don't sit there and argue the exception as overriding the majority or as overriding the rule. Don't say just because one person doesn't do something, that means no one in that group does anything along those lines. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because the thing is looking at averages, looking at statistics and all that is part of how we live through our lives. A lot of us don't realize it, but the thing is almost every choice that you make is based off of you analyzing probabilities. The more knowledge you have, the better the decisions you're going to make. Doesn't mean all the decisions are going to go your way. And squeefles, the extent that this applies to is pretty much everywhere in life. Just going to go ahead and I'm going to say that right now. I'm talking about in business decisions, in personal, person-to-person interactions. That's one of the reasons why I say don't sit there and just assume based off of what someone looks like that you know what they're about, because you don't. Like, I've met homeless people on the street that most people would think, you know, oh, they're a druggie, they're dipshit, so on and so forth, that have been very eloquent, very educated, very, you know, just had a run of bad luck or made some very bad decisions in their lives. But just because someone's made bad decisions in their lives doesn't mean that you shouldn't listen to them. In fact, those are the people that I tend to listen to, because then they can tell me what not to do. That makes it much more likely that I'm going to make the right decision if I have things that I can just take off the table. I'm one of those people, I believe in learning from your mistakes. And I agree with you, Squeefles. Whenever social science is the topic of discussion, you have to ask, to what extent does this apply? Does this apply to a micro group? Does it apply to the macro situation? Does it apply to the individual only? Does it apply to maybe a specific sect of a community? Well, whatever, whatnot, yada, 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 all the way down the fucking line. I agree wholeheartedly there. You have to define that. But with me, I'm making general statements here. So this is for macro situations. I'm saying do not argue the exception, because as soon as you start arguing the exception, no one should take you seriously. Like, if you've got a group of people where 90% of them do this one thing, but you find this one person in real life that doesn't do this thing that belongs to that group, you can't sit there and say, because that person doesn't do that thing, that we shouldn't assume that there's a high chance of this group doing that thing. All right? That's where I have an issue with arguing the exception, because the thing is it can actually, in fact, be dangerous in more ways than one. Not only dangerous for you, but dangerous for those around you, dangerous for the group that you're talking about, all of it. You have to be honest in these discussions, especially if you're trying to find a solution to a problem. And me, I'm one of those people, I always want to find a solution to a problem. I don't want to just sit back and bitch about it. I want to try to at least brainstorm, see if there's even the possibility of a solution. That's the reason why I like to get a bunch of people's opinions on a wide variety of subjects. Because the thing is even if you're the most educated person in the world on that subject, you do not know everything about it. I hate these people that sit there and say, well, I have a degree in this, so I know better, when you're actively able to prove that they are wrong, whether it be through a mistake of theirs that they didn't catch and they're not willing to admit was a mistake, trying to save face, or whether it be them actively not having the knowledge needed to objectively look at the situation. And we see that over and over and over again. And just because someone is not directly involved with something does not mean that they cannot have an opinion of it. If you think that their opinion of it is wrong, sit down, have a discussion with them. Say, hey, I think you might have some preconceived notions that I need to fucking dispel. And then do a good job of dispelling those preconceived notions. That's how you convince people. Because the thing is they're coming in with their own idea. They have the right to do that. What you need to do is try to get them to rethink that situation. That means the discussion that you have to have shouldn't be shaming tactics and so on and so forth. It should be thought-provoking discussion. You are not doing a good job if you could do just as good of a job by unscrewing the top of your head, taking out your brain, and setting it onto the table next to you. Well, Nick, like I said before, sometimes you're not going to be able to convince that person because sometimes they just don't want to be convinced. They think that they're right. They're not going to listen to you. But you can then at that point show all the fallacies in their arguments. You can go ahead and show how their arguments don't line up with reality. Then other people looking in will see them not be able to reconcile any of that shit and see them resort to name calling or personal insults, ad hominem attacks, all that sort of shit. And that's when you win. That's when you win an argument. Because once the person gets to that point, they're not able to argue with your argument. So now they have to argue against you as the individual. That is what ends up happening. And when these people ban you, that is them conceding, and other people will lose a modicum of respect for that person. Other people that are looking in that are open-minded. In fact, most of the time, those people will search you out. They will seek you out to hear the rest of what you had to say. They'll absorb that information and then take it into account when they're making their decisions, when they're making their judgments. And Carly, I can't disagree with them there. Statistically speaking, women in their younger years get paid more than men, but based straight out of the gate. But women who continue to be successful in the workplace are the exception. But I will agree that in the younger years, women do tend to do that. But again, that also comes down to nature at this point, and also the bigotry of low expectations that has been set for women. But some people are sitting there and trying to tell me that I need to go ahead and not rely just on Discord, but also go ahead and get a Twitter or a Facebook or something like that. I'm all like, how long do you think someone like me will last on there? Not very fucking long. If I got any sort of a following on there, I would get banned as soon as people started really noticing. And I'm going to go ahead and say this, and I am going to say this as an absolute. I do not trust any company that has a trust and safety council. Period. End of story. I will not trust a company that has that. Because trust and safety councils push narratives. They don't want open discussion. That's one of the reasons why I really don't want to start up a Patreon. Because they have a trust and safety council, and it has caused some issues already. So, not a fan of trust and safety councils. But the thing is when at that point, it's one of those situations of let's go ahead and talk about arguing the exception in a negative light. You know, painting an entire group in a negative light based off of the actions of a vast, like less than a percent of a percent of circumstances. Let's go ahead and talk about gamers. All right? People sit there and say that playing video games makes you violent. I haven't gone out and shot up in a school or a concert or anything like that. Ever. I know thousands of gamers. None of them have done that. But because one does it every once in a while and just happens to be a gamer, when there's just as many, if not more, that do it for other reasons that aren't gamers, yet they sit there and say gamers are violent, or all gamers are misogynistic, or all gamers are this, or all gamers are that, and they attack the group. It's all like, really? But these are also the same people that will sit there and call you racist for pointing out crime statistics. That is my problem with arguing the exception, because it can be exceedingly dangerous for people. Because if everyone was to buy into the every gamer is violent, every gamer is just a ticking time bomb waiting to go off, then people would be able to go ahead and justify arresting someone for playing video games. That is where the problem starts. And that's just where it starts. Because then you have the opposite that's true. You have groups that are very prone to committing violence, that are being ignored, that are having excuses made for them, saying, well, this small group doesn't believe in that. So that means none of them actually believe in it. They're all this high percentage is just a bunch of lone nutters. And I think it's funny that they were having a hard time proving actual misogyny in video games. So what did they do? They said that women make up the vast majority of gamers, right? And then they just magically release a study showing that the majority of misogynistic comments come from women. And so then they say, look, see, we said the vast majority of gamers are misogynistic. They were arguing an exception of an exception of an exception. That rabbit hole can go on for infinity. It can be completely unending until they get the result that they want. But the thing is when you go ahead and you argue the exception, not only are you ignoring the majority, but then you are putting the weight of representation of the majority on the minority. And therefore, with that minority, you are then putting them under a microscope. And I don't know about any of you, But I'm going to be honest. If my life was put under a microscope, it would be a very ugly picture. And I don't know a single person who could say that that isn't the case for them. So how about this? How about we start judging people on their own merits, not what group they're based out of or anything like that, but be honest if a group has a problem so that it can be addressed by the individuals in that group. But don't just assume from looking at someone or assume from hearing that they're involved with one group that you know everything about them, because you have no clue of who or what they are. Like, people will look at me and they'll hear that I'm a gamer, and all of a sudden they think that, oh, I'm a guy that uh, only likes violent media, that I'm a guy that only lives to play video games, that I'm a guy that will put any and all of my responsibilities, throw them to the wayside to play video games, blah, 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 all the way down the line. None of that is fucking true. In fact, I've actually just now managed to play Minecraft for a little bit. Minecraft, not even a high-end game. I don't get to play games all that much. But because I like to play video games, because video games are my hobby, I have all these misconceptions that are had about me. Just like there's a bunch of misconceptions about me because I'm white. Beard, misconceptions. A little bit more on the chubby side, again, misconceptions. Smoker, misconceptions. With all that shit, someone could sit there, if they're judging me just based off of what they hear about me, just those things that I mentioned, because we tend to mention the negatives about people, not so much the positives. Hearing all that, no one would want to fucking be involved with me in any form. Which is fine. I don't care. But there are some people that take it upon themselves to go out and actively try to fuck people over that they think might be bad. And that is the danger of those preconceptions. And that's also what happens when you argue the exception continuously, because it leads to more and more false notions about people. It also means you are guilty of groupthink. And I can't think of anything worse, really, to be guilty of. Because if you're sitting there and thinking of yourself as only part of the group, then you are taking away any personal responsibility for your own actions. Therefore, you can justify anything that you do. So don't argue the exception. Don't do the not all. Sit there and say, all right, what percentage of this group does this? Is this something that we need to be concerned with? If the answer is yes, then address it. address it relatively politely, but it needs to be addressed. However, if less than a percent of a percent of a percent of a group does something, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's all I'm saying. But when that whole not all argument turns into arguing the exception, which you will see over and over and over again, especially online, when that happens, take a look at what changed in the argument. And you will learn a bunch of information about who and what the person you are arguing with is actually about. You'll learn a lot about who they are. You'll learn about what their mindset is. You will be able to figure out their biases very fucking quickly. But it just comes down to observing the situation. Don't autopilot in an argument, because you miss out on a lot of information and you become less effective in arguing. Actually listen to your opponent, even if it's the same bullshit that's been spewed. They might throw in one extra little thing in there that you can latch on to, and you might be able to change their mind. And even if you're not able to change their mind, you'll be able to change the minds of the other people that are watching or listening or whatever. Quite frankly, I would prefer to fail to convince the individual of what's going on, but succeed in convincing everyone else that's looking from the outside in. So, on that note, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to end the stream here, guys. Thank you all for coming out, and I'll talk to y'all later. I'm probably going to be on the Discord for a little bit, so if you guys want to go ahead, talk to me, make a suggestion for another topic, any of that stuff, go ahead and do it. If you're not in on the Discord, I have the link down in the description. It's also on my About page. So have yourselves a great day. Talk to y'all later. Peace.